Hi, and welcome back. This is another fun week of remote learning. Man, do I miss seeing you guys in class. I'm trying to really slow things down, really kind of space it out, not overwhelm you too much. Because again, I know I've said it before, but we really got through the bulk of stuff. There's a few more big ideas that I would like to get through just to help you with whatever you might go on to next. But really going to space it out and hopefully not overwhelm you at all any of these weeks. So, what we're going to do this week is we're going to spend one of the assignments working on reviewing kind of the second half of chapter 6. The really bad part, the stuff with the fraction exponents, we did way back at the beginning of March. Good news is we're going to skip that. We're not going to come back. We're not going to review that. We're going to focus on just the last kind of half of chapter 6. So, one of the things we did probably the week before we started all this is we would have three different functions. Why don't you take a second? Probably a good idea to jot those down. I know I've said before, writing things down is always helpful. It certainly helps me learn. Obviously, I don't know, they're your notes, but might be a good idea to do that as I go. But one thing we did when we get a set of functions is we do different function operations. So one thing I might do is I might multiply them. So if I have f of x, let me cover this up so you're not confused, f of x times g of x, the first thing we do is we plug it in. So we say 3x to the 2/3, and you can use parentheses or you can just use the dot, and then g of x, 12x to the 1/4. Now, we do have to do a little bit with some fraction exponents, but it's not the really hard stuff. We are going to multiply the coefficients, and then remember what we do with those exponents, whether they're fractions or not. We're just going to add those fractions, and I'm plugging it into my calculator right now as well. Use your calculator. And when you do that, you get 11/12. So 36x to the 11/12. Let's go ahead and let's do this one that I'd covered up, division. So for division, we've got f of x and g of x. So same two again. So we're going to do 3x to the 2/3 over 12x to the 1/4. A little sloppy there, sorry. We're going to reduce the coefficients. So both of those are divisible by 3. So we're going to get 1 over 4. Then remember what I do with the exponents there. I'm going to subtract those exponents. Just do top minus bottom. If you do end up with a negative, that just means that fraction goes on the bottom. But this one's positive, so it goes on the top, x to the 5/12. And you can have that one I have in front of it. You don't have to. I just had mine because I did it in parts. Same three functions. Here's where that h of x is going to come in. Another division. Negative 2x over. That g of x again is 12x to the 1/4. So remember, we're going to reduce. I don't care the 2's negative. It just becomes negative 1/6. Subtract our exponents. 1 minus 1/4. Well, that's 3/4, and it is positive, so it will stay on the top. All right, so that was a lot of that 6-3 section. And then we moved on to what was called composition functions, where we had, again, functions. These are new ones, so you want to jot those down. You can always hit the pause button if I'm going too fast. And then we had things like this. Remember, we would say this as f of g. And then if there's a number for this one, we'd say of 4. Sometimes we're going to see or remind ourselves there's a variable, and we'd say of x. Well, remember order of operations. We start inside the innermost parentheses. There's nothing I can do with that 4, but I can do that part. So I'm going to say g of 4. And I ignore the rest of that now for a second. And when I see g of 4, that tells me, hey, go to the g function. That 4 gets plugged in where the x is. So we're going to have 4 minus 1. Those parentheses on top are important. Divided by 3. Do it in our head, in our calculator. If you're using your calculator, you got to have the parentheses up there. In my head, that's 3 divided by 3, so I get 1. Well, remember that 1 replaces g of 4 because those are equal. So then what I'm going to do, I don't really have room there, I'll go over here, is this is telling me to do f of 1. That's part 2. These will have 2 parts to them. That tells me to go to the f function, And again, sometimes you could see the same function twice. Most of the time they change it. But we'd have 2 times 1 squared. Do that in your head calculator. You just need to have one step. You don't need the order of operations. 1 squared is 1 times 2 is 2. So 2 is my final answer. If you wanted to rewrite it and say f of g of 4 equals 2, you can. I don't need to see that line, but I do need to see you labeling these parts and then what each of those is equal to. That's your work you're showing me. All right, let's try another one. This same set of functions. G of h of 3. Maybe even pause the video, try it on your own first. We start with the inside. So we're going to do h of 3. And again, you're going to label what you're doing. And so here's that one. So we're going to do 3 plus 2. I know we could do that in our head, but I want to see that. That's 5. That replaces this. So now we're going to do g of 5, because that's what I got in my first answer. Tells me to go to g. 5 minus 1 over 3. This one's not going to be so nice. We're going to get 4/3, or you can write it as 1 1/3. Remember what I always say, no decimals, please. All right, same functions, but now we've got this h of x. There's not a number there. So remember, when there's not a number, there's nothing to plug into h. What we're doing here is we're taking the whole function and plugging it into g. So h into g. The inside one to the outside one. So h into g. I'm going to erase that because I'll use it later. But that means I'm going to keep, use different colors here, the parenthesis. I'm going to plug in x plus 2. That's taking place of that x. I still have minus 1, and that's all over 3. Well, those red parentheses don't really matter. I can combine that 2 and negative 1 and get a positive 1. That's all over 3. I can't do anything. Remember, it'd have to go into all 3. Nothing can go into all 3. I leave it just like that. Let's try another one. F of h of x. Again, maybe a good idea to pause it, give it a try, start it back up. Let's see how you do. This is telling us to take h into f. So this one into f this time. So I'm going to keep the 2. I'm going to plug in, let me use blue. I'm going to plug in x plus 2. That's taking place of that x, and I have to square it. Remember, order of operations here. You can't distribute first. That tells you to go to the exponent. Remember something else we've talked about all year. You can't distribute. Something like that, we're going to have to FOIL. So I'm going to write that out twice. I'm going to keep the 2. I'm going to FOIL. I'm going to get x squared plus 2x plus 2x plus 4. I'm going to combine like terms. You could combine like terms first or after you distribute. I'm running out of room, so I'll go ahead and distribute. 2x squared plus 8x plus 8. So sometimes it can be a few more steps, sometimes maybe just 1 or 2 steps after you plug in. All right, moving on to the next section. So if you're going back and you're looking in your notes, this was section 6.4, I believe. May have been 6.5. I know we skipped one of them. I don't remember which one. But look where you have inverses. Pretty sure it was 6.4. And you can always go back in your notes for that. The only thing you don't really have in-class notes for is the last section, 6.6. Okay, so back to this. We've got this equation. To find the inverse, remember you're going to switch x and y. And then solve for y. So I'm going to switch. I'll just keep it in black, I think. So that becomes x, negative 2/3, y, plus 4. Now I need to get that y by itself. So I'd subtract the 4. I like to flip it around too, so I say negative 2/3 y equals x minus 4. Now remember, some of you are going to divide by negative 2/3. I'll come back to that. But what I kind of like is multiply by the reciprocal. You keep the sign, negative 3/2. And then you're going to distribute over on the other side. So when I do it that way, I can do it without really a calculator. negative 3 halves x plus 12 over 2, which just becomes 6. If you do it the division way, not a big deal. Let me do it over here to the side. We're going to divide by negative 2/3. And you don't have to show this every part here. But what I would want to remind you of is this is 1 divided by negative 2/3. It doesn't just become negative 2/3 x. When you do 1 divided by negative 1/3, that is how we get that negative 3 halves. You're multiplying by the reciprocal. And we get the same answer there. So either way is okay. All right, so that was inverse. You won't have a lot of those. You'll have a few. And again, when we have a quiz, because we're doing it in this format right now, it will be open note. All right, solving. This is what we just did last week. So we need to get the radical by itself. So I'm going to add 6. So I'm going to have the 4th root of 2x equals 5. I think I said add 6. We're going to add 3. Sorry. It's been a long day. Now, to get rid of the radical, opposite of a radical is an exponent. We want the exponent to match the index. Remember, the index is that number right there. Remember, when I do it on this side, it's 5 to the 4th, not 5 times 4. That 4 is an exponent. These things will cancel. We'll get 2x equals 625. Last step is to divide. I'm just lazy and I'm not going to try and divide that. I know it doesn't reduce. If you want to go ahead and divide it, you can. You're going to get 312 and 1/2. Either one of those answers would be okay. The other type we had last week was when we had exponents that were fractions. Don't want to try and distribute that. We know you can't distribute exponents when there's addition or subtraction. So we want to get that whole thing by itself. So I'm going to add 1. I'm going to have x plus 1 to the 3/4 equals 27. And remember what we're going to do here. We're going to use an exponent. Think about what exponent I need to use to get that to cancel. Well, whatever I put here, I'm going to be multiplying. Well, to get it to cancel, I use the reciprocal. So I'm going to use 4/3. So over here, I'm going to have x plus 1. You're putting this in your calculator. You're putting it in as 27 to the 4/3. But I just want to remind you what that means. Remember what exponent fractions mean. So that means I break it down into a radical. Think about which one of those is your index. That's your 3, all to the 4th. When you put that in your calculator, it's taking the cube root of 27, 3, and then it's raising it to the 4th, 81. Again, you don't need to show any of that. You can put that in your calculator. Last thing I need to do is I need to subtract 1. X is equal to 80. Whoa, whoa, whoa. We'll come back to that in a second. I actually am going to post that a little bit later on in the week just to give you some answers before you take your quiz. I will post those answers probably Tuesday of the week. If you want to message me because you already have the assignment done and you'd like to check some answers, you've turned it in, that's certainly okay. Your assignment is going to be to do worksheet 6.3 to 6.6. You're going to submit that either email or Google Classroom. I'll just abbreviate like that. Remember to write the problem, show work, and I'll grade it like a normal homework. Turning it in, you're going to get 8 points. I'll grade 1 or 2 problems for correctness. That will make it worth 10 points. All right, if you have any questions, as always, email me, drop me a message on Google Chat. I will get back to you as soon as I can. Good luck.